Hello, hold on, I'm going to take this out. I can't sit still behind a podium. But I just want to thank Bob and the Summit Group for having us here today. It's so much fun for us to talk about what's going on to people who are actually experiencing it out there. So whether or not you are thinking about listing your home, have it already listed, or if out there looking around to buy, hopefully you'll get something out of these. But one of the first places that you tend to go when you're thinking about real estate is the internet. So what I thought I'd do is go over some of the headlines that we've read that kind of make me laugh, but not everyone. But when you start looking at the conversations that the news media is having out there amongst themselves and amongst the public, sometimes it becomes pretty evident that a lot of people are confused and why they're confused. So let's just get started. The bubble. This is how many of you guys have heard about a price bubble? Yeah, this is like the topic that will never die. Bubble 2014, these are just from this year, starting at December 31st. Housing market could be facing another bubble, Case Shiller from CNBC. 5 days later, Time Magazine says this one chart shows why we should not fear another real estate meltdown. One chart, boom. Anything else? January 13th, just about 10 days later, Seeking Alpha says, oh yeah, the reason you can't see this bubble is because it's a stealth bubble. It's stealth. It's going to come out here any minute and pop out. February 13th, a month later, Blackstone, which is a very large real estate investment company, says we don't see a real estate bubble, no U.S. bubble here on CNBC. March 18th, Bloomberg says it's coming. You might not see it, but it's coming. Trulia says, don't worry. March 25th, we have a bubble watch. The whole website dedicated to strictly watching the bubble. But you know what? You shouldn't worry about it. Everybody just needs to simmer down. Wall Street Journal says, yep, no, we don't see a bubble here. But California is looking a little frothy. And then by April 15th, Housing Wire says, here's proof. The housing bubble is about to burst. And then by May 13th, that's today, CNN World said, well, if there's not a bubble, then maybe it's a bublet. Bublet. That's the new, I'm going to have a whole nother slide on bublets here pretty soon. So as you can see that there's a lot of conversation going on about the bubble. Hopefully we can tell you our opinion, which is that we're not in a bubble, but we at least have some data to help show you why we feel that we're not in a bubble here. Vampire foreclosures. Did you guys see all of the headlines on vampire foreclosures? This came out in October. Actually, we haven't heard a whole lot of vampire foreclosures, but a vampire foreclosure is a foreclosure where the owner has stopped making payments. The bank has not taken over the home yet, but the owner is still living there. Do you know where they have the most vampire foreclosures? New York. New York and New Jersey. There are people who have not been paying a mortgage 5 or 6 years sometimes, and they're still living in the home. But the reason why we haven't heard about vampire foreclosures, this was vampire foreclosures damaging the housing market. Vampire zombies haunting some states. And the vampire zombies spook the state housing markets. Zombie foreclosures have taken over. Zombie foreclosures, the undead titles pillaging U.S. homeowners. 300,000 undead properties stalking ex-owners. Borrowers hit with debts that won't die. Zombie foreclosures still weighing in on the housing market. This is just this year, March 13th, 17th, 28th. How to kill a zombie foreclosure in your neighborhood, in case you have one. Zombie lots returning to life in some neighborhoods. That was just April 17th. So for those of you who are not familiar with the zombie foreclosure, it's not too far off from a vampire foreclosure, where a home whose owner has abandoned the property but which the bank never finished foreclosing upon, therefore leaving the owner legally and financially responsible for the decaying building. That is what they call a zombie foreclosure. The majority of zombie foreclosures are also on the East Coast. It has to do with judicial processes for foreclosing, which Arizona does not have. We're very fast with our foreclosures here. So a lot of these are talking about places like Florida, New York, New Jersey, East Coast type areas. So boomerang buyers. There's a whole slew of those. Have you heard about that? How many people have heard about a boomerang buyer? Okay, the realtors in the room. A boomerang buyer. Well, whoever they are, we need them. January 7th, this was actually Michael Orr was quoted in the paper saying 2014 needs the boomerang buyer. Boomerang buyers could boost housing market. That was January. Street Insider says millennials and boomerang buyers, they're confident. They're coming. March 5th, where are these people? Press says, where are you, boomerang buyers? Orlando says, they're going to be in the next bubble. Don't invite them. They're going to give us another bubble. And then by April 28th, the Wall Street Journal says, shut up, Orlando. We need them. We have a slow housing market. We need the boomerang buyer. A boomerang buyer is somebody who has already gone through foreclosure or short sale and is in a waiting period before they can buy again. So usually it's about 7 years after a foreclosure. It can vary on short sales, but Michael Orr is going to go through a few of that and talk about where our next wave, hopefully, of buyers are going to be coming from. But if we can't get a boomerang, what's happening with the millennials? Do we even know who they are? Does anybody know who the millennials are? Well, let's talk about them. The millennial generation is key to the housing market. ASU research, millennials not buying houses in the Phoenix area. That was Michael Orr as well from February. Millennials not buying into the housing market. They're struggling from the recession. This guy says, what are you guys talking about? They're buying luxury real estate. May 12th, why the millennials are hurting us now. Now even the millennials are hurting our real estate industry. May 7th, ASU report, more evidence millennials are not buying homes around Phoenix. That was also Michael Orr, quoted for today. And where are they? Partying. No. Millennials are defined as somebody born between 1980 and 2000. They could be anywhere from 14 to 34 years old. Obviously, we're not too interested in the 14-year-olds. If you have one, please start talking to them about real estate now. It's really important that they start saving. They're going to save our real estate market. So that's why we're starting to see a lot of news about the millennials, what's happening with them. A lot of it has to do with student debt. Why aren't they buying into things? And Michael's going to also talk a little bit about them too. But if you can't get them, maybe you can get some marijuana refugees. These are the next. January 31st. Haven't you guys heard Colorado? Maybe a lot of millennials might be going to Colorado. We're not sure. But this is a marijuana refugee is somebody who has a health condition or has a child with a health condition that marijuana can help, or they are seeking marijuana to help with their conditions. But there are a lot of things that happen that kind of complicate the whole marijuana thing. So anybody know of an HOA who wants somebody growing pot in their neighborhood? So it's little things like that. What to know before you pull up roots. Marijuana refugees face real estate challenges. Kansas City moves to Colorado for Sons Medical Marijuana. Clarksville moving to Colorado. Northern Virginia moving to Colorado. So is that what we need to do to get some people to Arizona? Most of the people moving here for marijuana are moving to Sun City. Just saying, here it's really good for arthritis. So, any questions on that so far? Can you see how it might be a little confusing? Just to make it even more confusing, let's talk about some of the housing indices that come out, the indexes. February 18th, National Association of Home Builders came out with their housing index that plunged to 46. How many of you guys know what the housing index is? Most people don't, but guess what? It's plunging. That's bad, right? That's bad. Also, February 19th, a day later, the housing market index is disappointing. The day later after that, housing affordability holds steady in the fourth quarter. Is the housing affordability the same as the housing market index? I don't know, but that's disappointing. This is steady and this is disappointing. I don't understand. 21st of February, Realty Track says home affordability is a major problem. And then March 6th, Zillow came out and says, we have a groundbreaking survey, indicators of homeowner and renter confidence. We're going to talk about those too. So first of all, let's talk about the Home Opportunity Index. The Home Opportunity Index is put out by the Association of Home Builders, and what it does is it calculates of all the properties that were sold, what the median price was, and also takes what the median household income is. And it's stating here that in the country, of all the homes that sold, for those families making it the household median income, they could afford 65% of them. Does that sound like a bad number? It's actually not. We were in this type of affordability for so long in the country, between 72 and 77%. That's a lot. That is actually above average. This goes all the way back to 2001. This is our whole decade. And you can see this is our normal area. Our normal range historically is between 60 and 68. In Phoenix, this number got as high as 87. Can you imagine a family making the median household income could afford 87% of what was selling in Phoenix? Is that insane? Yes. The answer is yes. Because the median household income is right around $60,000. Now, you may have had to wrestle somebody, an investor for it, who wants to pay cash. You might have to wrestle somebody for it, but you can afford it. This coming down has caused a lot of press saying affordability is going down. This is a problem. You know what else was not selling in this time frame? Luxury. There were no luxury. Luxury has been dead out here for quite some time. So as luxury starts to recover, the affordability rate goes down because, of course, those properties are not affordable to a family making the household median income. So this is not a bad number. Going from 77 down to 65 is not bad. In Phoenix, we're actually about 67.5. That means that if you make the household median income, you can afford over half of what's selling. Not a bad index. However, if you look at the HMI, which was the housing market index we were talking about, that plunged to 46, that was so disappointing. The housing market index measures how builders feel about the market. They go and interview a bunch of builders and say, how do you feel about the market? Are you getting showings? Do you feel bad? Do you feel good? How are you doing? And right now they feel bad. And I'll tell you right now, this index goes up and down more times, has more mood swings than a toddler birthday party. They feel good, they feel bad. What's interesting is that everybody's talking about this little piece right there. Can you see that? Teeny tiny, that little drop. The irony of it is that we were actually at that same measurement this time last year, but everyone thought it was good. So it was good because it was going up, yeah, this is awesome, but when it went back down there, that was bad, very bad. But as you can see, we're still kind of on a recovery. The builders, and we're going to talk about builders a little bit, they're not doing so hot. They're not doing as well as the resale market right now, so their sentiment is pretty low. Now, to add more letters to the vegetable soup of our indexes is Zillow. Thank you very much, Zillow. We now have 4 more indices. We have the Housing Confidence Index, which is a conglomerate of the Housing Market Conditions Index, the Housing Expectations Index, the Homeowners Aspiration Index, all together. So what they do here is they interviewed more than 10,000 people, had 300,000 consumer responses pertaining to real estate markets across 20 different metro cities. The measurement over 50 is considered positive. Okay, so Phoenix is actually right along here, along all these indices. We're at 66.7, right around in the 60 range, which are good. But what this measures, the Housing Market Conditions Index, asks homeowners, how do you feel about your current worth of your property? Do you feel good about it? Do you think it's market value? Do you think it's undervalued or overvalued? That's what this measures, the Housing Market Conditions Index. This one asks those same homeowners, how do you feel about what it's going to look like next year? Do you think your property value is going to go up or go down? And then they take another measurement. And then this one here asks a renter, how much do you feel that you are actually going to go buy a home this year? Are you going to move out of your rental or are you going to stay in your rental? And that's this. And then they put them all together into one HCI. So the next time somebody says, oh my gosh, I just heard about this index going up or down or whatever, and you can say, really? Which one was it? The HOI, the HMI, the HCI, HMNCI, or HEI, or HAI? One of them, because they're all different. And then, of course, there's my favorite slide. These are all of, well, not all of them. These are just actually a handful of Michael Orr quoted articles just over the last few weeks from ASU, from AZ Central, Home Buying Institute, and the Phoenix New Times about all of the other things. I've been telling Michael that he needs to get a number of different photos, ones with smiley faces and frowny faces, so that it matches the article. You know, sometimes when it says, you know, Arizona's recovery is still 2 years away, we should at least have a flat face, right? No, I don't have to do that. So Anyhow, with that, we're going to introduce Mike Orr, and hopefully he can clear up some of the confusion of all of the noise in our media. So we're going to take a quick break while we switch out the microphones and carry on. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody hear me fine? Good. I'm going to be talking about some numbers, but before I do, I want to talk a little bit about emotions. We all know that real estate is a very cyclical market. It's probably more obvious than most markets because we've just been through an enormous downturn, having had a huge party in 2004, 2005. The point of this chart is that the emotion you feel is very often telling you exactly the wrong thing. It's not a very good idea in real estate to rely on your emotions, because at the time you feel most optimistic and euphoric about the market, that's when it's just about to go and collapse on you. That's why when people are all screaming about a bubble, you can be pretty sure you're not in a bubble. Because at the time of a real bubble, everybody is making so much money and having so much fun, they don't stop to think about when it's going to end. And the same happens at the point, for us it was between 2009 and 2011. We were in despair, everybody was skeptical the market would ever recover. That was the time to ignore all the pessimists and buy as much real estate as you possibly could, because it will never be that cheap again. And I was telling people to do that, but 99% of them thought I was crazy because their emotions told them it was too scary. I don't really rely very much on emotion. I don't do emotions. I'm a mathematician. When I want to feel an emotion, I ask my wife. And she tells me how I should be feeling. It works really well. So this looks pretty similar at first. This is actually a chart of what the average price per square foot has been for homes that sold on the local MLS. The ARMLS is the Arizona Regional Multiple Listing Service that covers the whole of the greater Phoenix area. So you can see we started around $100 per square foot, and then in 2004 things started to get a little crazy. We all had an enormous drunken party. Everybody thought they were getting rich. Prices would never stop going up. Mortgage brokers were driving Bentleys. And we got to $190 a square foot. And you'll notice it kind of hesitated for a bit. By the time we got to 2006, everybody was holding their breath. They could see the disaster coming, but it didn't actually hit us till 2008. Prices collapsed by more than 50% in just 12 months. We went all the way down to $80 a square foot. We hovered around there at the bottom. You'll notice there was a little bit of a bump. This is what happens when the government bribes you to buy homes. Just like the cash for clunkers, people actually followed their orders and went and bought some homes. And as soon as the program ran out, the price goes back down again. So although you got an $8,000 tax credit, you lost $8,000 on the house. It was still a good time to buy a home though, because since then prices have taken off. We hit bottom at 79 in the summer of 2011, and you can see we've had a very sharp recovery. We're now at 130. We were at 130 last month, and the month before we've actually at 129 May months to date. Who knows where it will be at the end of the month. The interesting thing about 130 is that if you take 100, as we were at 2001, and you apply inflation, the consumer price index to it, you actually get 132. So prices have gone all the way back to where they would have been if we hadn't had any emotions. We'd all been buying homes like computers. And steadily gone up in line with everything else, sliced bread or what have you. Everything except anything to do with healthcare or a college education, which have all gone up much more. So the implication is prices now gone up 63% in just 2.5 years. That might sound a lot, but really that's only because they went down so much. Pricing is pretty fair right now. And they have another 47% to go from where we are now if they're ever going to get back to where they were in 2006. I often get asked, when will they get back to that? And the correct answer is, I have not the faintest idea. And nobody else does. So if they tell you they do that, they're just kidding. What we do know is that if you bought between November 2004 and June 2008, you're probably still going to have an equity issue, likely to be underwater if you bought or if you refinanced and took a look at equity out. So we still have a large number of people with negative equity who are in that sort of mountainous area there. But everybody who bought since 2008 is looking pretty good. Home prices are no longer rising right now. I need to make sure that's clear. It looks on that chart like things are still doing great, but if you look carefully, you'll see there wasn't much change in the last few months, and it's not likely to move above 130 for a while. It will at some point. But they're no longer rising. If you look at the median sales price for normal sales only and single family only, you'll see that they've really not changed very much since last June. 215,000 was the median in June, 210,000 is the median right now, 11 months later. Now you see that the price per square foot kept going up much more than the median. That's because the luxury market is doing very well. The rest of the market, not so good. When I say luxury, I mean $2, $3, $6 million homes. They are selling very well. We'll come back to that later. And they tend to push the average price per square foot up. They do not have much of an impact on the median because they sell in such tiny numbers. That was the MLS transactions. If you look at everything is recorded at the county, which is also transactions that don't go through the MLS, it's also flat for the last 9 months. So I'm not kidding you, prices are not going up. Do not assume that if you're listing your home, you should add 10% whatever the man down the street sold for. You will just not get any showings. They are flat right now. The good news is they're not going down much either. They might start to go down in the second half of the year though, so be careful. Not by very much, but they might. Before I get on to any more prediction, I have to give you my legal disclaimer. I'm not very good at legal things, but please believe me, anything I say about the future may and quite probably will be untrue. Not because I deliberately lied to you, but it is very difficult. Not only is it difficult to predict the future, it's actually very difficult to know who first really said this. 99% of Americans think it was Yogi Berra. Because almost everything that's a famous saying is either from Mark Twain or Yogi Berra. However, I do know that it was first said in Danish before Yogi Berra was born. So it's not likely to be him. But nobody's quite sure if it was Niels Bohr or some other Danish person who first came up with it. Anyway, with that disclaimer, I'm going to talk about a thing called the Cromford Index. This is a bit like your speedo on the car. It tells you how well the market's performing. And like any market, it's based on supply and demand. If you measure supply and demand and then divide one by the other, you can tell how hot the market is. In these things, 100 is normal. And this is done from the point of view of a seller. So if it's below 100, the seller is not doing as well as if it's above 100. Right now, well, I say right now, this was for May the 12th, yesterday. It's not changed very much, but 85.7 says it's actually favoring buyers because it's in the red zone, not the green zone. And the reason it is because supply is pretty normal, it's in the yellow zone, but demand is significantly below normal, that's only 81.8. Come back to talk about some of the reasons why. This has not changed very much recently, but it's changed a lot since last summer. August, it was at 151. That was a terrific time to be selling. And if you listed your home, the odds are, if you got the price reasonably accurate, you would have 3 or 4 offers within the first week. That was not normal. And the reason it was so unbalanced is, you notice demand was nothing special. It was in the yellow zone, but supply was very low, only 63. We had far fewer listings available than normal. So what has changed? Well, the supply has gone up and the demand has gone down. If we look at the long-term changes on the Cromford Market Index, things were pretty stable back here at around 100. They dipped very slightly after 9/11, But you can see what happened when we had that crazy period in 2004 and 5. And it didn't last long. The party went on for a year or so, but the hangover was about 3 years long. We went all the way down to about 26, which was dreadful. We had this bounce here where the government was bribing us to buy homes, and then the after effect of that. But for the last 2.5 years, up until the summer, we were having a very strong market, and it has slipped below that balance line about 5 months ago. And you notice it's not dropped a long way below. We're about the same level as we were here when we had the after effect of the taking away of the government incentive. No, nothing like as bad as we were in 2006 and 7, but it is below normal. Looking very closely at the last 6 months, this is what has happened. We were actually in the balance zone here, which is between 90 and 100. Seller concessions were coming back, but the market was still feeling pretty good. Things started to get slower in February, March. And there has been a very, very slight improvement between March and May, but it's hardly anything to get very excited about. Once we get back into the yellow zone, then the balance between buyers and sellers is back to normal. Both sides have a reasonable shout. But right now, if you've got one buyer and one seller, it's the buyer who's going to call the shots. If the air conditioning is not working right, he'll want you to fix it. And you'll probably want to do it because you may not get another good buyer for 6 months. That would be my advice. If we look at each individual area in the Greater Phoenix, and I haven't looked at the tiny ones here, but the larger cities, it actually varies a lot. There are 3 cities up here that are above 100, so it's still a seller's market in Apache Junction, Sun Lakes, and Sun City West. It is absolutely terrible in Casa Grande, Maricopa, and Levine. So if you've got a listing there right now, you're probably getting pretty fed up. So you can see it does, although the first figure I showed you was for the whole market, it varies a lot by area, it varies by price range. And notice I publish this every week, and the green arrows going up say this is where it's actually got better over the last 7 days. You can understand by now this is for people who are really obsessive about the market like me. I'm not telling you that you should look at it every week, but it's nice to know somebody cares.
What's that chart called?
This is the Cromford Market Index for each city. I publish it on either Thursday or Friday each week for the people who subscribe to the Cromford Report, like Bob Herzog, for example. Most of the other realtors in this room. Then we say, well, what's so special about Apache Junction? Well, it has a reputation for having a lot of aging hippies who smoke a lot of dope. And Sun Lake, Sun City, Sun West, well, they have all something in common too, don't they? Old people. In fact, if you put the median ages up there, did you know Sun Lakes was actually slightly younger than Sun City West and Sun City, but 73, that's a pretty high median age. The good news for people living there, at least the males, is that the ratio between males and females in that population is 130 to 100. So there's a lot more females because they live longer. And you'll find that with the youngest people are actually congregating in Avondale and particularly El Mirage, unbelievably low, 25 in El Mirage. So that we're not one amorphous valley here. The reason for I point this out is that we've already heard that millennials are not doing their fair lifting in the housing market. That has no relevance at all if you're in Sun City, because they weren't allowed to buy homes there anyway, or at least they could buy one, but they weren't allowed to live in it. Because these are all 55 plus areas. So if the millennials aren't buying, who cares if you're in Sun City? It makes no difference. That's why they're still performing well. The rest of the areas are underperforming because millennial demand is well down from where it would normally be. So before I go on to any more math, I'm going to summarize everything. So if you don't like math, you can forget everything after this and just remember these few little bullet points. Just enjoy the meal. So supply is close to normal. People will tell you there's lots of supply, but that's only because demand is weak. If demand was normal, the supply would seem actually a little low. We've got under 30,000 listings. Not so long ago, we had 58,000 listings. That was a lot. That was when most of those listings were owned by banks as well, so that was pretty sad. Demand is weak. It very rarely gets below 80%. It doesn't vary as much as this. 80% is a long way below normal, but the good news, it is starting to edge up a little bit. There are lots of things that you are told to worry about that you should not worry about. First of all, loan delinquency is still a problem in some parts of the states. It's a big problem in New Jersey, it's a big problem in Florida, it's a big problem in New York, many other states where they still have a lot of people who are not up to date with their loan payments. We are at 4.5%. That is well below normal. 5% is normal. So we're one of the actual most on-time payers of mortgages. Before we get too self-congratulatory about that, that is because all the people who weren't paying their loans got foreclosed, leaving the rest of us as the only ones around still with loans. And of course, banks have not been lending to anyone without perfect credit for a long time. So the performance of loans written in the last 5 years has been absolutely stellar. As a result, foreclosures, we've basically gone through a tsunami of foreclosures and we're now below normal. We've got less foreclosures happening now than we had in the year 2000. And the population has grown by 25% since then. So don't care if they're vampires or zombies or anything, just do not pay any attention, it's irrelevant. The only people who should worry about foreclosures are the ones whose jobs depend on foreclosures, like the auctioneers. They are laying people off. Investors were all over us for the last 3 years. They've basically packed up and gone. The local investors who are here from one decade to the next, they're still around. But basically the ones who came in from the East Coast or Canada or Atlanta, wherever, they've packed up because our prices have recovered to the point where there aren't many bargains anymore, and with no foreclosures, there's no real way to winkle homes out of people for less than market value. That's what they're really trying to do. So they've moved to the other places that still have a lot of delinquent issues. 15% is the normal amount, 40% is just ridiculous. We were at 40% at July 2012 through July 2013. That was really the peak investing period. Out-of-state investors are another big source. They're also showing less interest in us. 20% is kind of normal. 29% was above normal. A lot of that was Canadians. They were buying here for two main reasons. The Canadian dollar was really strong and our prices were cheap, and we get lots of sun and they don't. And if you're a rich guy in Alberta making lots of money out of the energy business up there, it's really nice to have somewhere to move to where you can catch up on your suntan. And you won't get much in Alberta. We tend to attract people from the western half of the US and the west part of Canada. The people on the east, they go to Miami for their sun. So where we stand at the moment with this weak demand is you should expect to see some price weakness in the second half of 2014. Do not panic, it's not important. If the median goes from 205 to 200 or from 210 to 205, that's really just a rounding error. It's not significant. And it's certainly not a crash or a bubble forming, as many of the headlines will probably try and persuade you that it is. This is just what happens when demand gets a little soft. There's no reason for prices to go up. So we have buyer's market. Price rises have stopped since July. Price per square foot looks good because of the high end, and also because when you don't have many problem homes selling, those prices don't go into the mix. Most homes selling today do have appliances in the kitchen. There was a time 4 years ago when most homes selling did not have any appliances. So, this is a different market. Also, you need to understand that you cannot just list your home and expect it to get an offer. Last year that would have happened, Now you actually need to think about keeping it in good showing condition, maybe staging it a bit if it looks a bit rough. It will need marketing, it needs some good camera work to take the best shots, and you should expect it to take 3, maybe even 4 months to get it sold, not 3 to 4 days like last year. 3 to 4 months is normal. In 2000, it was I arrived in Arizona from California in 2002, and most homes were taking 3 or 4 months. I took 3 or 4 months to decide which one to buy. So days on market has still not gone up a tremendous amount, except 64 is normal and 84 is where we are at the moment. But do remember the buyers have negotiation power, and if you're a seller, you are competing with the other sellers in the area. It used to be last year that it was the buyers who were competing with each other, all trying to outbid each other to get the really nice houses. So that's a completely different market. Amazing how things can change so quickly. And they can change back again. And they probably will at some point. Now, when I say demand is low, I need to explain how low. They're actually at the second lowest level since 1999. So this is pretty frighteningly low until you dig into the numbers. This is looking at total home sales through March. This is everything recorded in in Maricopa County for March, and you can see that we actually did 7,500. That's better than what we did in 2008, but it's worse than every other year, including 1999, when there were a lot fewer homes here and a lot fewer people. So it's certainly not a buoyant market. The good news for people who are involved in resale is the big drop is actually in new homes. These are the new home sales. We did 756 new homes. We did 2,748 back in 1999. So new homes are basically, we only have about a third the number of subdivisions that you can buy them in the first place. So it's not like they're in trouble, but just the whole new home industry got completely killed by the recession. We lost 90% of the construction jobs. And only about 10% of them have come back. So that's a big reason why the Arizona economy is not in the shape it used to be. And biggest disappointment here for the builders is it actually went down from last year. They were expecting it to continue to go up. It is going up if you look at multifamily. This is single family. And the reason it's going up in multifamily is if people aren't buying homes, what are they doing? They're renting them. And so there's a lot of demand for rentals right now, and people are reacting to that. So, okay, if they want to run a home, I'm going to put 400 apartments up. So we got a lot of apartment building going on. But home ownership, that supposed American dream, is not on the agenda for a lot of people. This is looking just at resales. So you can see, even though it's nothing like as bad as the situation with new homes, it's still gone down the last 3 years. Most of that, by the way, is because of the absence of cheap, distressed homes. If they're not available, you can't buy them. So big question is, why is demand below normal? And I'm not pretending that I have all the answers here. I have some theories, and some of them are probably worth more than others. So I'm going to share you what my theories are, and you can make up your own mind. Some of them are pretty difficult to prove, one way or the other. The easiest one is investors. Investors do not use a lot of emotion. They're like me. They basically get spreadsheets out and work out, are they going to make money if they buy this house? And it's a pretty simple business. They don't need logarithmic scales or anything like that. If the prices go up enough that they can't rent them out for a profit, they find somewhere else to go where they can. And they were buying lots and lots of rentals here until July last year, and that's when they basically said, okay, we got to the price point where it's no longer making our objectives. Cash flow, the cash profit is going to be around 4% or less. I can probably do better than that somewhere else. Now, at the height of their enthusiasm, some of them were making 16 or 18% return on buying homes and renting them out, which is pretty good. Better than putting it in the bank or in the stock market, probably. We've already looked at affordability. It's good by historic standards, but it's not as good as last year. I'll come back to that a little bit. Interest rates. People complain a lot about interest rates. In fact, the media loves to obsess about interest rates. I believe they're almost irrelevant to the housing market. The reason I believe that is because, first of all, the average mortgage interest rate over the last 50 years is 8.6%. So if 4.5% was a problem, then we should have been selling no homes at all for most of the last 40 years. Secondly, buyers do not really care as much as you think about the interest rate. They care about whether they're going to be approved. So it's no good having a 3.5% interest rate if you can't qualify for it. You'd rather have a loan at 4.7 or even 5.7 that they're going to say, yes, you can have it. Because you can always adjust the house you buy. You have one less bedroom, or you'll do without the granite countertop or something. If people really want a home, they'll find one. The interest rates just change which home they're able to afford. But when a banker says, no, you're not good enough for a loan, don't bother filling in the form, that has a very bad effect on demand. And for the last 3 years, most lenders have been turning down more loans than they've been accepting. It's kind of a natural reaction to the fact that in 2004 they were basically approving just about every loan they got, and that didn't turn out so well. Not only did they lose a lot of money, they ended up being the most hated people in the country. Everyone was grumbling about lenders and how awful they were. It was all their fault. It was never the borrower. But it actually takes two to tango. In my view, and we all deserve some of that blame. Now we've got these millennials. They're showing little desire to own, and there's lots of issues there. It's not that they're having a hard time, they're actually a pretty optimistic group as a whole. They're not depressed, they think things are going to get better. But they have some issues. First of all, many of them, in fact the best educated of them, generally have student loans to pay off. There's two problems with that. First, that's got to come out of their salary. Secondly, when they apply for a loan, that's already an existing loan that reduces what they're eligible to borrow. So we've got more people with bigger student loans than we've ever had in life before. What's more, the serious delinquency rate is now at 12% for student loans. Remember, it was only at 4.5% for mortgages, and that wasn't serious delinquency, that was any type of delinquency. That was 1 day late. So the actual delinquency rate for student loans is approaching 20 to 25%. And by the way, it's not all the young folks. A lot of those loans went to older people too, and they're not paying it back either. So we have a national issue. If we have a problem, I think it's much more in the student loan area than it is in the housing area. They also, many of them, they've got education, but they've got themselves into a career that's not really the one they set out to get. They may have studied to be an architect, but nobody needs an architect right now, so they're doing something else. But they really want to be an architect. And so they like the flexibility of renting because they think there might be an architect's job coming in Denver next, or wherever. So a lot of them change jobs a lot, and renting is much easier to get out of than a home you've just purchased. They've also had some sort of inoculation against home ownership when you think about what happened to their parents or their uncles or whatever. In Maricopa County, 1 in 4 people had a foreclosure over the last period from 2008 to 2013. 1 in 4. So the chances are every young person knows one of their relatives who's had one. And that did not end well. So they're not believing in the sort of thing that I believed when I was 22. Buying a home was the best thing you could do for your wealth in the long term. You'd be able to retire happy if you bought a home and you kept buying bigger and bigger homes. It worked for me. I didn't get foreclosed, but for these people, they are still worried about, well, I don't really understand housing. I don't know how foreclosures came about, but I know they were very common before. They could happen again. Sounds a bit risky to me. So all in all, we have very, very weak household formation. And household formation is clearly the driver of housing demand, whether it's renting or buying. If people are not creating new family units, you don't need any more houses. So when Junior stays with parents until he's 39, that's not good for the housing market. Or when he goes out and gets a job and then comes back. That's the other type of boomerang. And right now, we know that younger people are very many more of them are staying with their parents much later in life. And even if they do create a new household, they are tending to go out there and share with all of their friends because they're not married or having kids yet either. Back when I was 22, all of my friends were getting married, starting families, having babies, and you know, doesn't really work, this room sharing thing when you got babies, right? You get very unpopular if you've got a baby and no one else in the house has. So, we've got a very different sort of generational experience from what the baby boomers or Gen X had. And the difference is this millennial generation is actually pretty big, pretty numerous, and they are the people who are going to determine the economy going forward, not my generation. Let's knock a few things off. Mortgage rates. Everybody is totally devastated by the fact it's gone up from 3.35 to 4.34. It was at 18.45 at one stage, and during that year we built more homes than we're building this year, or last year, or any time in the last 5 years. So 18% is not an interest rate that kills the housing market. If that doesn't kill it, nothing will. So I basically say don't believe everything you read about interest rates having a big impact. We've already looked at this chart from a country point of view. This is the Phoenix area affordability chart. You'll notice here that we are at 67.5. We're down from 86, which was just ridiculous. But we're in the normal zone. We were at 26.6. That should have been a good clue that it was a bubble. It was a bubble. We are not in a bubble at 67.5. We're just normal, and this just basically says if you're thinking of buying a house now, my advice to you is you should have done it 2 years ago. It was definitely much better then because it would have saved you like 40%. This is how Phoenix looks compared with some other popular places to live. We're not particularly expensive. At 67, we're on the cheaper end of things. Now, Tucson is even more affordable. Tucson is one of the most affordable places in the whole country right now. Detroit, very affordable. Probably for a good reason. San Francisco, not so much. Notice if you're at 14.1 in San Francisco and you move to Phoenix, you would probably suddenly feel like a multimillionaire overnight, just because of all that spare money. So the big question is, why aren't more of them doing it? I did it. I moved from San Jose, just about the same price, and I had that effect. Suddenly I could afford everything I wanted, whereas in San Jose everything seemed too expensive. Well, I think there are a lot of people who, this market could improve dramatically if we suddenly made ourselves more attractive to Californians.